Shalom, my name is Rabbi Heschel Greenberg.
And I'm Bernstein. Welcome to Let My People Know. The purpose of our program is to inform the Jewish and the non-Jewish community about the Jewish religion. Soon we will be celebrating the holiday of Passover, which occurs in the month of Nissan, and that is what we're going to be talking about today. Rabbi, when I was doing research for our program today on the month of Nissan, there was something that I wanted you to clarify for me. They call it the book called Nissan, the first month of the Jewish religious calendar. And I always thought the Jewish New Year began with Rosh Hashanah in September. So could you please clarify that?
Well, first let me clarify that Nissan is not the name of a Japanese automobile manufacturer. Some of our listeners might have thought, why are we getting into Japanese issues? This is a Jewish name. Nissan is the name of the month in which we have Passover, obviously. You asked a question that is obvious to most people who hear that Nissan is the first month of the year, yet they know Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the Jewish New Year. Well, I think the best way of answering that is by referring to a passage in the Talmud that says there are 4 Jewish New Years, that the Jewish year has 4 heads. That's what the word New Year actually means in Hebrew. Rosh Hashanah does not mean New Year. Literally, it means the head of the year. Well, the Jewish year has 4 heads. That means there are 4 different points in time that guide and inspire the rest of the year. I think that's perhaps the best way of putting it. Perhaps if we want to use an analogy from our own secular experiences, although it's not a perfect analogy, we know that we have various cycles in our year. The civil year begins with January, the fiscal year begins June, July, the academic year begins September, the baseball season, the football season, the hockey season, every sport has its own cycle. Well, within the Jewish calendar year, we also have 4 different cycles. For the purposes of this program, I'd like to focus on 2 of them. The one that most people are familiar with, namely Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, or the Jewish head of the year, is the day that marks, that commemorates, if you want to use that word, that recreates, which I think is a much better word, the very beginning of existence. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the creation of the universe, specifically of Adam and Eve. The biblical account of creation culminated with God's creation on the 6th day, which was Adam and Eve. Well, that occurred on what we now call Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is the beginning of the year. That means that the influences that govern and guide the entire Jewish year, the entire year period, derive their energy from the day of Rosh Hashanah. That is the fountainhead of the natural cycle. Nissan, on the other hand, is considered to be the beginning of the cycle of the Jewish year in another aspect. That's when the Jewish people became a nation. That's when they left Egypt. So that is considered to be the beginning of a cycle. It's also the beginning of the cycle of the seasons. It's the spring. It's the beginning of a year of all the produce that we have and all the food and all the necessities of life. But in terms of Jewish experience, Nissan is the beginning of the Jewish existence. And the word Nissan also has a meaning, though the names of the Jewish calendar, of the months in the Jewish calendar, are not originally Hebrew. They're Babylonian names, but they do have some Hebrew connotations. Nissan has the word nes in it, which means miracle. In fact, it has the word nes forwards and backwards, which leads the Talmud to say that Nissan means miracles of miracles. So while the Rosh Hashanah that we more familiar with represents the beginning of the year in terms of nature, the natural cycle, Nissan is the beginning of the year in terms of the supernatural cycle. It's the period that begins it commences a period of miracles, that which takes us above nature. And of course, that's what the Jewish experience is all about, that which transcends nature, that which gives nature a deeper meaning, a deeper character. So that explains why we have 2 different New Year's, because we have 2 different cycles, 2 different functions. One is the natural, one is the supernatural. One is the universal cycle, one is the Jewish cycle.
Okay. According to the Bible, the tabernacle was erected in the wilderness on the first day of Nisan,
Correct.
which was called the new moon, or which is called the new moon. On the 10th, a generation later, the Israelites crossed the Jordan to occupy the Promised Land.
Right.
There were lots of things that
So
happened.
there were many things that happened in
Yes.
the month of Nisan. Also on the 10th day of Nisan, the last year before the Jews entered into Israel, that's when Miriam, Moses' sister, passed away. That day was the 10th of Nisan. So there are many events that occurred in this month.
Was there a special story about Miriam's passing and the disappearance of the well of Miriam?
Yes, when the Jews were in the wilderness or desert, there were three things that one cannot survive without. One cannot survive without food, one cannot survive without water, and one cannot survive without protection, clothing, shelter, and so on. Well, in the desert, none of these things are available, but miraculously, the Jews received all three. They received food, the manna from heaven, the water they had miraculously from a rock, and they also had shelter provided to them, for them, by the clouds of glory. And our sages tell us in the Talmud that these three different provisions came to the Jewish people as a result of the presence of three very, very special people. Moses was responsible for the manna from heaven. It was in his merit that the Jews had food. Aaron was responsible for the shelter and protection. The clouds of glory were there because of Aaron's merit, and the water came as a result of Miriam's merit and righteousness. When she passed away, that's when the Jews no longer had any water, and they complained to Moses. Ultimately, God restored all of the three things, even after Miriam passed away, even after Aaron passed away. Moses himself was the one who shouldered the burden for all three. But your point is that Miriam was not just some personality, but because of her, the Jewish people survived in the desert. So therefore, the 10th of Nisan is an important day in relation to the passing of such an important individual.
Traditionally, the 15th of Nisan marks the beginning of the harvest season in Israel, and also the Holocaust Memorial Day, which is called Yom HaShoah, is, this is interesting, in Israel celebrated on the 27th day of Nisan, but in the Diaspora on April 19th. Why is that?
Well, I would like to, this is a controversial issue, the scheduling of Yom HaShoah and Nisan. Most people are not aware of the fact that there is some tension involved in that. The month of Nisan is supposed to be a joyous month because of the miracle of Passover, and we're not supposed to have memorial services in that month, and therefore there's some tension in the Jewish community about the scheduling of Yom HaShoah on that day, and that's why some communities prefer to have it on other days. In fact, the late Prime Minister of Israel, Menachem Begin, suggested rescheduling Yom HaShoah for Tisha B'Av, the national day of mourning, the day that commemorates the destruction of the first and second temple. But putting that aside, Nisan has many very important dates, and most of them relate to something joyous, but not necessarily all the dates in Nisan.
So, all right, we have established that fasting, funeral eulogies, and public mourning, displays of mourning are prohibited during the month of Nisan.
That's correct.
But joyous occasions, such as weddings, now, are they permitted
In the first half of the month, we have weddings.
First half.
Once we start the holiday of Passover, we do not have weddings during the holiday. That's an 8-day period.
Okay.
And then the second part, after the holiday of Passover, we get into a period known as Sephira, where we count the days, and it's considered to be a period when tragedies occurred in the past. So although we're not supposed to overtly express any feelings of mourning, we do not, in some communities, have weddings during that period either. Well, there are different customs about that. This is not a matter of law, it's a matter of custom, depending on which community and when that particular period of limited mourning is observed. So some people would have weddings, some will not have weddings. But by and large, Nisan is considered to be a joyous month, and every day of Nisan, virtually every day, is considered a holiday. And the reason for it is Passover is only 8 days out of 30. There are 30 days in Nisan, and Passover only takes 8 days. But actually there are 22 days of Nisan that are considered to be holidays, 22 or 23, depending on how you count. The first 12 days of Nisan is considered to be a series of 12-day holiday, because when the tabernacle was built, and as you mentioned, it was inaugurated on the first day of Nissan, the first day of the month, every day for 12 days, the leader of every tribe had to bring a special offering in dedication of the tabernacle, as it was called, the Mishkan. And that day is designated as a holiday for that tribe and for the entire Jewish people. So for 12 days, we had, you could call it minor holidays. The day before Passover is the day that the Jews had to bring a Paschal offering. They would eat it the night of Passover at the Seder. But the day itself, before Passover, is the day designated for the offering of that sacrifice, and that's also considered to be a holiday. So that gives us 13 days, plus the 8 days of Passover. The day after every holiday is called Isru Chag. Isru Chag means the day that's attached to the holiday. It's the day that we wind down, and it's also considered a joyous occasion. So that gives us 12 plus 1, the day before Passover, 8 days of Passover, and then that day, that's 22. And then the last day of Nisan is considered to be the beginning of the next month, so that we have, in fact, 22 or 23 days that are considered to be joyous. And therefore, the entire month, since the majority of it is that way, we do not say certain prayers in which we ask God for forgiveness. We don't want to bring any sadness into it. It's basically a very joyous month and a month of miracles. The Talmud says that Nisan was the month the Jews that were liberated from Egypt, and in this month of Nisan, the Jews will be liberated from their final exile. That means it's the most auspicious month, the most fitting month for liberation. And many very happy occasions occurred in this month throughout Jewish history.
Well, I recall we were planning our wedding in the month of April, and we were told there were certain days, they called them the gray days. Now, I don't know whether that's just a superstition. My family called them the gray days, or I don't remember.
Well, in general, there's a custom that in any month, in any Jewish month, weddings did not occur in the second half of the month, with few exceptional months. And the reason for that is that the moon is the symbol of the Jewish people and of the relationship in every marriage. And the first half of the month, the moon is on the ascendancy. The second half is when it wanes. So we want our mazel, our luck, our fortune to be on the ascendancy rather than on the decline.
Our choice was April 1st or April 2nd, and we didn't want to be married on April 1st and have our anniversary on April Fool's Day, so we took the 2nd. So hopefully that was lucky. Rabbi, there's an interesting story from the portion Chukat in the book of Numbers concerning the Red Heifer. And when I was reading, I just found it very interesting and fascinating. Could you tell our viewers that story, please?
The Red Heifer is simply a red cow. And there's a whole story about a red cow because as part of the preparation for a holiday in biblical times, as opposed to the way we prepare for a holiday today, the individual had to go through a purification process, which meant that before a Jew could enter the temple grounds in Jerusalem and offer a sacrifice, or just be there, that person could not have been in contact, let's say, with a dead body. That's one of the forms of impurity. It doesn't mean that the dead body is unclean physically. It means that there's a certain spiritual state of limitation, if you will, that is experienced when you come in contact with the dead. Judaism is a religion that glorifies life and that believes that God's presence can be seen in life and God's absence is evident in death. Although God is all over, we do not see God when there's a cessation, a termination of life. A person who comes in contact with the dead, and there's nothing wrong with that, a person goes to a funeral, they have to recognize that they have to make a transition from death to life, even though they only touched the dead body, or they were in the same room as the dead body. Before they can enter the temple, the holiest place on earth, the symbol of life, they had to go through a special purification process. And that process is referred to as the process of the red heifer. A red cow, totally red, of which there were only 9 in the history of the world. There has not been a red heifer since the destruction of the Second Temple and a little bit after that. That cow would have to be killed, slaughtered in the ritual way. Its flesh would be burnt, the ashes would be diluted with special spring water. The Torah refers to it as living water, and certain plants would be mixed into that, and that would be sprinkled on the person who wanted to be purified. This is a process that could occur any time of the year for any individual who would want to come to the temple. But Passover, it was incumbent upon every Jew to be in the temple to offer the Paschal offering, and therefore everyone had to make sure that they were ritually clean, and they would go through this Red Heifer process. And for that reason, in Jewish communities today, though we don't have the Red Heifer and we don't have the temple, until the Mashiach will come, we do not have those things. We still read the portion of the Torah a few weeks before Passover to remember the events of the past and to pray to God that we will once more have the ability to be in touch with the spiritual values that characterize Jewish life in the past.
You did mention that a lot of people do believe that if another red cow should be born, it would be a sign that the Messiah is coming.
I'm not that excited about finding red cows,
Okay.
actually. Let me just try to explain what I mean by that. I do believe that there are enough signs of the imminent coming of the Mashiach that we don't have to find the red cow. When the Mashiach will come, he'll find us the red cow. We don't have to look for red cows now. We have to become better people.
I was also looking at something that was talking about the blue thread on the tefillin, which is the prayer shawl.
You mean the talit?
The talit, I'm sorry, that was taken from a fish, a very rare extinct fish which no longer exists. And possibly if that fish was found again, it would be a sign. We're not doing a program on the Messiah, but that was just a little anecdote.
That fish, some people argue, is not extinct. In fact, there's a controversy about this. About 120 years ago, approximately, a Polish rabbi did research. He wrote 4 books, conducted extensive research to find that shellfish that had this purple-blue dye, which the Torah says should be used for dyeing one of the strings of the talit, of the prayer shawl. Most rabbis disagreed with his discoveries, but even more recently I heard that there are some researchers in Israel who claim to have found this fish, and it's not extinct. It's just that it's a very rare species and it's very hard to find it. When the Mashiach will come, we will find it. That's not the important thing in the Jewish community, to find the things that will be available when the Mashiach comes. Our task is to make his coming more and more possible by paving the way for his coming, by doing the right things, not by looking for extinct fish or by red cows. That'll come when it has to come.
Only reason I had mentioned those 2 stories was because someone had said, if you do a program on the month of Nissan, please have the rabbi tell the story about the red heifer and the extinct fish. So that's why we have to listen to our
review. We might want to do a whole program on the extinct fish. It's a very fascinating, research. There's a lot, of controversy about it, although most people have never heard about it. It was a very, very hot controversy in Europe over 100 years ago.
Rabbi, is there anything else that you would like to add today about the special month of Nisan?
Well, thinking about the dates, the various dates of Nisan, of course, Passover deserves a program of its own, but the day before Passover is also the birthday of one of the greatest Jewish people that ever lived. It's the birthday of Maimonides, the one who wrote The God for the Perplexed, the one who wrote the Mishnah Torah, which is the most comprehensive code of Jewish law. Maimonides was born the day before Passover, and it's interesting that he was born precisely at the time that one would bring the Paschal offering, which was a lamb, which symbolizes the idolatry of Egypt, which we're supposed to destroy. And Maimonides devoted his life as an iconoclast, destroying myths, destroying pagan notions, and trying to enlighten people as to what the true nature of religion should be, the true nature of the unity of God. He was very strongly opposed to any adulteration of the concept of the unity of God, and he was born on the day before Passover.
And of course, Passover is going to be coming, and is now. Did you establish that the Passover is celebrated at a different time in Israel and in the diaspora?
We began celebrating Passover the same day. It's the 15th of Nisan. It's just that Passover is a 7-day holiday in the Bible. The first day and the last day are considered to be the more holy period. The 5 days in between is considered to be a semi-holiday. Now, in Israel, they only have one holy day in the beginning and one holy day at the end. In the Diaspora, we have 2 holy days in the beginning and 2 holy days at the end. So we add on an extra day at the end, and the second day of the holiday is not a semi-holiday, it's a full holiday. We also have 2 Seders, or Sedarim, the correct Hebrew pronunciation of plural of Seder. In Israel, they only have 1 Seder. There's only 1 Seder the first night of Passover. We have 2. So we gain a little bit by being outside of Israel. I mean, they have more of almost everything else. They have to give us something to compensate, I guess.
And is there a special time during the month of Nisan when the preparation for Passover begins?
Preparation for Passover actually begins 30 days before. I mean, you can begin preparing the day after Passover for next year, but a month before is considered to be the traditional time for the preparations for Passover. As we get closer to Passover, 2 weeks before, of course, the tempo increases and the intensity of preparation gets stronger and stronger. Many people bake their matzah for Passover during the month of Nisan, and there are some people who bake matzah in the afternoon of the day right before Passover. Hand-baked matzah, that's a very special time for the baking of matzah.
Okay. And we will be doing the next 2 programs on Passover. We will be telling our viewers about the Seder and displaying exactly what the Seder table looks like and talking about the story of Passover. But Rabbi, maybe for the benefit of some of our non-Jewish viewers, when we say the preparations for Passover, exactly what are we talking about?
Passover is not just a day to sit back and to enjoy a festive meal. Part of Passover is the cleaning of the house so that there is no chametz, no leavened bread or any products that have some leavening in it. And the preparation involves more than just spring cleaning, although it has that. It's the most thorough type of cleaning and inspecting a house for any particular ingredient that we get rid of before Passover. Also, the meals of Passover are quite elaborate, quite definitive as to what they're supposed to be like. So there's a lot of preparation. Passover is a time when we have many guests over, so there's a lot of work that goes into the preparing of the house for Passover. I would just like to add, when we talk about Nisan, that it's a time of miracles. The word Nisan, as I mentioned before, means miracle of miracles. Talmud, in fact, says if you have a dream in which you hear the word Nisan uttered, you know that great miracles will happen. Well, I think that this is a good opportunity to express the wish that great miracles should happen, because I think many of our viewers are aware of the many different tragedies that have occurred in this community and other places all over the world, many negative things, and we're really hoping and praying for a reversal of that, and let this be a month of true miracles and miracles of miracles.
Well, that's a wonderful thought. Now, Rabbi, you mentioned again about the spring cleaning and of course, getting the house ready. And do we actually have to, we have to get rid of all of the chametz, which is anything containing flour?
Any product that has flour and any other combination of ingredients is out. Unless it was baked specifically for Passover under special supervision. And then you would know by looking at the label on it that says that this is under rabbinic supervision. Any product in most Jewish communities that have any type of legumes, corn, rice, even though it's not flour and water, we do not use those products. And there are different products in different communities that are avoided on Passover.
Now, Rabbi, what do we do with the chametz, with these products that we must get rid of? Do we store them somewhere? Do we give them to the poor?
You can do whatever you want with the chametz. That's the Hebrew name for all these products that we're not allowed to have in our homes on Passover. You can do whatever you want before Passover. Give it away or sell it, eat it up if you want. But for those people who, and most people are in that category, who cannot give it all away, what we do is we lock it up, and then we go to the rabbi who negotiates a formal sale of our chametz to someone who is not Jewish, so that during the holiday of Passover we are not legally in possession of our chametz. It's just to keep us away physically and even legally from having any contact with that type of ingredient. It's to really reinforce the idea that Chametz and Passover don't mix. Chametz is the symbol of that which rises, that which is arrogant, that which is assertive in a negative way. Matzah, the food that we eat on Passover, is symbolic of humility. And Passover is when the Jewish people became a nation. It's a time when we try to emphasize our humility rather than our aggressiveness, rather than our arrogance. So that the Chametz, which also symbolizes idol worship, and that's why there's the Paschal offering, which represents the destruction of the idols, is such an important theme in Passover. Getting rid of Chametz, getting rid of idolatry, and recognizing that there is only one God and that we have to humbly accept Him as our God. That's the...
And of course, Rabbi, for the women in the audience too, if we use our ovens, we may use the same ovens, but they do have to be scoured absolutely clean. And what about a microwave?
Well, the scouring is only one part of it. They also have to be burnt out. You have to turn the oven on the highest and most intense heat to burn out anything that might be there. And of course, I don't have we don't have the time to go into detail how to kosher an oven. One should consult a competent rabbinic authority to get all the directions how to prepare one's stove and oven for Passover. Some people have special Passover kitchens that they only use during Passover.
I see.
And not everyone has that, but they do have to change their kitchen to conform to Passover. It's a real experience. It's a real, the preparations are very tedious, but they're very exciting as well.
Yes, I know. Thank you, Rabbi, and I hope our viewers will watch our future programs when we will be talking about Passover and the Passover Seder. We hope you have enjoyed our program. Thank you for joining us, and Shalom.